Welcome to this episode of Threading Thoughts. The fast moving consumer goods industry is at a crossroads. Consumers are increasingly demanding healthier options without compromising taste or convenience. This shift presents both opportunities and challenges. Add to this the pressures of cost, supply chain disruptions, and changing consumer preferences. It's clear that the FMCG sector must innovate rapidly to thrive in this new era of conscious consumption. Shubham is the COO of Kind Cones, which is a plant based all natural ice cream brand operating out of Singapore and Malaysia. The brand aims to bring back the innocence in our ice creams, which have been marred by the infusion of chemicals, palm oil, and artificial additives. Currently, the brand operates 7 stores and is present in hotels and supermarkets. Welcome to this episode of Threading Thoughts. I'm very happy to welcome Shubham, and we're going to have a very interesting conversation, not only on the FMCG sector, but also something that has taken the world by storm. The preponderance of our health issues and why eating healthy has become such a very important, not a fad anymore, but something that is very critical to our very existence. So, Shubham, thank you so much for taking time off and joining us for Threading Thoughts.
Thanks a lot for inviting me.
You're most welcome. So, Shubham, let me just start off with asking you, right? It's a very saturated FMCG market. So, what made you start this, a wholesome ice cream brand?
First of all, just to be clear, I did not start it. So I'm CEO. I joined in the middle. But if you also look at from another angle, every segment seems saturated, right? Until you have really delved deep into that and you figure out, okay, there's some gap. I think so. Back in 2017, it's very interesting how it started. It was Sarina, who was the co-founder. She was suffering from some lactose intolerance,
Okay.
IBS, and at that time, the founder couple, were living in Malaysia, and circa 2019, there were hardly any vegan options at that moment. So I think um, she was really inspired by that. I would say that she was a fan of ice creams and in general, trying out different cuisines. But due to her health, it gave her a kind of a reason to start. So initially, the brand was started using, the regular coconut milk and all of that, and ice creams turned out to be quite icy, non-scoopable, but the taste was good. So there was, that spark.
Right.
And slowly through friends, families, and connections, the word spread. Then she was used to do events. She used to do events, pop-ups, and eventually, the brand bloomed before COVID into 5 outlets in Malaysia and one in Singapore. Then obviously COVID happened, and we all know, right? The businesses um, kind of shrank and then came back. So this is how it started. I think retrospectively, and even as an outsider now, if you see the growth rate of ice creams in Singapore, it's about 1 to 2%, and it's totally cluttered market. Any consultant kind of a person, analyst kind of a person, would not do it.
No,
Yeah.
no, but thank you. Thank you for that. And so you sort of touched upon some of the challenges, but I want to ask you, what were your biggest lessons, right, that you learned early on or even as the brand progressed? What were some of the lessons that you learned?
Yeah. I think early on, I could only speak anecdotally, is there was this lot of noise around, hey, why not you make it keto? Like the entire range of the ice creams
Right.
into no sugar ones. Why not make it low sugar? Why not make it, high protein? Because when you're starting your journey into I would say, a well-being segment, better for you segment, people from all walks of life have their opinions. And it's up to the conviction of the founders to really stick to their guns and really, back their vision. And it was never part of the plan that we'll go a certain route limited to a certain dietary need. I think that was the lesson that, okay, there were some digressions, but eventually we realized as long as the story is around ingredients, I think we can cater to a larger mass and business becomes viable rather than a hobby. Then, as the brand progressed, and I also saw it personally, the other mistake which happened was, I think back in 2020, 2021,
Mm-hmm.
when the market was booming, investors' money was flowing in. There was a lot of noise around why don't you go into CPG, why don't you try D2C, and so on and on. So obviously, the founders took a bet, didn't materialize because of multiple reasons, which we can discuss in the later part. Yeah. So the lesson was, I mean, whatever segment is working for you, first refine that before diversifying.
True, true. Rather than put your hand,
Yeah.
your finger in multiple pies,
Yeah.
sort of work through what you can do. And no, that makes
Yeah.
complete sense. And life always throws these curveballs. Like COVID was a huge, whatever black swan event that we want to call
Yeah.
it, but it sort of gets you thinking on a lot of issues that might come up, especially in, food sectors or things that can get bad quickly as well. So that's absolutely
Absolutely.
lovely. And how did you go about the market research expansion? I mean, as a
Hmm.
company, I mean, how did they do it, or as a startup, how was that done?
Yeah. So most of the startups, we were like those without any money, without any fancy budgets for the likes of, the marketing agencies. The benefit was, unlike any other startup, we had our own outlets. We still retain those outlets, and they not just act as, selling vehicles. They also act as data gathering centers. Um, and you have to spend just this time there. I mean, if you're launching a new flavor, just do a basic consumer research.
Correct, correct.
So even today, right? We let's say on during Christmas, we were thinking about two flavors: peanut butter jelly and lotus biscoff with apple compote.
Oh,
Right, both fancy sounding, great. I might, I would have gone with lotus
Lotus
biscoff.
Biscuit. Yeah.
Yes, but we did some trials in the parlors in the ice cream centers. We realized that it didn't fly well with the customers. They prefer BB&J a lot better. So this is something which is still in the DNA. Even today, when we are doing a brand activation for Kylie Jenner's brand or any other brand, we still have almost the same questionnaire. We still give our customers the samples, and yeah, I mean, keep asking the customers.
I think there's nothing like
And
actually getting on the ground feedback, right? That's what you're doing. You literally are.
absolutely, and yeah, and to make it scalable, so this is something that we do qualitatively, but even if you want some quant data, we have loyalty program and we have thousands of people there who are very passionate about the brand and the kind of products that we have, and we just have to post one Instagram or we have to email them. They're very happy to give insights.
No, it's a loyal customer base as well, right?
Yes, yes,
And sometimes those are the sort of go-to network that you have, right? On
yeah,
actually letting you know in your face what works, what doesn't work. I mean, there is this honesty that comes from them that large market surveys, it's
yeah,
sort of shrunk into a group that really helps.
yeah. And time and again, we host them at our multiple outlets, whichever is nearest, and just have a sharing session. And then the customer also feels, okay, I'm part of this brand. And I would say there's no exchange of money or vouchers
True,
to
true.
bring them on board. They just love the product. They come, they feel, okay, yeah, my feedback matters. So we do that. Also, very interestingly, we just launched two franchisees, first ever franchises in Singapore. Both of the franchisees are from our customers
Oh,
who
nice.
asked us to do, yeah, who asked to take a franchisee. So, I mean, there's enough brand love that not just they're willing to spend on one scoop of ice cream, they're willing to make a career out of it.
That says a lot, right? I mean, that says a lot about what they think of the
Yeah,
brand, what they think of the ice cream itself, and where you are right now. I mean, from where you started for somebody
yeah,
coming and buying to actually trying to promote your brand as a business model. That's
yeah.
an amazing step. No, no, that's absolutely lovely. And I'm sure that you've had your naysayers as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
People who have given that kind of constructive feedback. So how does that work though? I mean, how far do you run with that?
Every single day we get something. I mean, there's a saying that if you have to please anyone, you just sell ice creams. I guess that's not true.
That's not true. Oh,
So
we believed it. We still believe it. Okay.
that's not true. So just like any B2C company, I mean, you're serving food to people and they'll have their opinions, right? So even I'll just give an example. So I can go on record, strawberry ice creams are 40% less on, roughly 40% less on sugar and calories than Haagen-Dazs similar variant, similar packaging, right? But customers sometimes tend to feel that, this is a bit sweet for me, and I I can't just throw data on their faces, right? I mean, that's that's not what you're supposed to do.
Right.
So we get those things. We do have our naysayers, obviously, because it's, I would say, it's a different product. It's not exactly a dairy milky flavored ice cream. So you will feel that there's a difference sometimes if you have very nuanced palate, but that is deliberate. We want you to taste if it's a coconut base, we want you to taste the coconut base. We want you to taste the almonds, the cashews, the fruits, quite deliberately. We are not mimicking a vanilla for a vanilla in the ice cream.
Right.
Like Beyond Burgers and Impossibles of the world. We're not going that route. It's a different dessert altogether. It mimics ice cream to some extent, but I'm not trying to convince you it's 100% your dairy alternative. If you prefer that, go for it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You are what you are, and you're offering what it is. So, there's
Yeah,
that honesty that you bring to the table and say, this is what it is, right? Picking
yeah,
and choosing is up to you. And but what's so different about the band? I mean, you sort of touched upon, but what is really so different
yeah.
about
I think the fundamentally the brand, right from the day it started with a vision that okay, I'm not going to use any premixes, and premixes are something which is very pervasive across ice cream industry. It's a bag of powder which is filled with chemicals, potential carcinogens under studies, dyes, and all the emulsifiers, stabilizers, E numbers, which is something you would not give to your infant,
correct?
right? Um, so we deliberately took a call that we'll never use that, no matter what. We'll still try to make the ice creams from the ingredients which are readily available from any supermarket, any grocery stores, any kirana stores near your house. So if it's a cashew milk, these are just the cashews you get in Kerala. We source it from Kerala, by the way. So I think that is very fundamentally different from any other brand,
Mm.
that will not cut the corners. Secondly, we are true to being plant-based. Again, it's not championing a certain lifestyle. It's just who we are. If you are a meat eater, it's totally okay. It's totally okay. We are not too in your face in terms of the branding that we are here to save the cows or you know doing activism in the name of branding. So that is still fundamental. Um, I think then one very important thing which we all resonate with is be kind, which is
Mm.
part of our logo, t-shirts everywhere. So whenever, if you ever come to our outlets, if you ever order something from us, you will feel that there's an energy in the outlets. The staff is selected, nurtured in such a manner that we are always kind. You drop a scoop, we'll not charge you extra, and you want something right, whichever way we can help you out, we'll do it,
Right.
um, within the confines of possibility.
That's
So I think that is the culture and the product itself, which I explained. It's something which makes us different. And even when we expand, one of the biggest, I would say, hindrance right now is how do you expand an artisanal ice cream into a more commercial,
true.
mass-produced
True.
product for developing countries, right? So this is
And
a struggle,
without
but
losing your, the
exactly
uniqueness.
without losing the uniqueness. So, but we are figuring out a way. I think we'll be the first one to figure out a way to make real great ice creams, plant-based ones for even developing markets.
No, but that's lovely. And when you're talking about, expanding, it also makes sense
Hmm.
that there are many in the market already. There are people who are in doing what you're doing, perhaps slightly differently, but they're still doing it.
Yeah,
So, it's still, they are also in that same. market space. They are also reaching out to the roughly the same customers. So that kind of a competition should be quite intense. But if it is not, then it grows to be intense very soon, right? So at least in India, I mean, there are multiple outlets that do sell, you know, ice creams that are completely supposed to be, healthy for you as well, as much as they
Yeah.
can be. So how do
Yeah.
you deal with that as well? Because it's not that you go into the market and however unique your brand is, there is that competition that you get into. It's not just ice creams, but I'm talking about specific healthy ice creams that come into this
Yeah.
segment.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other benefits that we have is the store model. I know, like in the e-commerce model, there are multiple incumbents, especially in India. So I am more confident about the market where I operate. Singapore, Malaysia, we're soon opening in Thailand, and potentially in India as well. I mean, there's some talks here as well. So the model here is, which also blends into the mistakes part. We tried doing the fair price and the CPG route. We are
Right.
still there. We are still maintaining the shelf space and all. We tried doing D2C. Again, we are still growing in D2C. But we realized the biggest contributor to revenue and EBITDA, and of course the customer love, is the storefront.
Mm.
And why is that? Because somehow we have figured out through iterations and failing that this is the model that works for us. Now, in this channel, this is the channel we want to grow with, whether it's franchising, JVs, own outlets. How many players are there in these channels who offer this kind of service? Again, on Excel sheets, I cannot really talk about the service that we provide, but reiterating, once you step in, it's part of our training that you will feel a part of Kind Bones once you're inside. So
Right.
I think wherever we go, I'm aware of the competition. So we'll not be foolish to, just bulldoze our way with limited budgets right next to a good competitor. We'll identify such markets. So as far as currently in Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, there are hardly any players who are doing clean ice creams.
Mhm.
I'm not even talking about plant-based, even dairy ice creams.
Right.
Hardly any. And again, in Singapore, it's a function of high rentals being, an entry barrier. Thailand, similarly, a lot of noise. Local produces quite well. Like in India, we have faludas, jigatandas. Singapore has chendol. Thailand has a lot of other products. But there is a space. The whole market and demand for better for you products is growing, and we have a mature product. So I think it's okay if in a particular city, if there are two, three, four, five players which
Sure.
are competing for the same thing. It's fine if my customer sometimes purchases X brand and us. Good for everyone.
Yeah. There's enough to go around. There are enough customers as well.
Absolutely. Enough customers.
And yeah, just one thought with me when you were speaking was it's not the Excel, but it's the experience, right? So
Oh yeah, that's a good line.
yeah, I should be doing branding and marketing, I guess. But
That's a quotable line. I'll
but
use it on my LinkedIn.
oh, you're going to use it, and you're definitely going to, mention that I did speak about. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's the credit goes to her. But yeah, but I like the
Yeah.
line. And so, talking about competition, you sort of briefly touched upon it, but
Yeah.
what were some of the mistakes that you made? Because sometimes
Hmm.
conversations never dwell around, we often say failures and it takes such a negative connotation. It's not at all.
Yeah.
It's just mistakes that you learn from or experiences that you learn from. So, what are some of the mistakes that you made and what did you learn from it, or how have you corrected it, or are you still correcting it, or, it's
Yeah.
still in the works?
Yeah. I think the biggest one, which still, kind of a white elephant, that's still looming around is, so we raised some funding on the pretext of, going into the CPG space. It was booming and everything. So I think the retrospectively, I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but yeah, financially it was a mistake at that moment. It's just a matter of the time, right? Um, we entered too soon without forming a team, without forming a proper plan, because the DNA to capture a CPG is very different from operating your own
Rama.
outlets.
Yeah.
It's extremely different. The time it takes to understand what is the listing fees, what are the promotions, what are the hidden charges. Oh, the store is going to charge you for the whitewash and the painting. Unfortunately, that has to be in the costings. What are reasonable margins and all of that. So because we were not prepared for this, all of these costs, all of these expenses previously, the forecasts were not correct. The MOQs of even the packaging were not right. So this is some of the mistakes which we identified. Um, and I think it's a good lesson because Singapore gives you that opportunity with a small market that your mistakes are not expensive.
Mm.
Had we done that in a country with, let's say, 500 outlets, and some of the bigger retailers would have given us, let's say, 100 outlet first, which is nothing, right? And the same retailer would have had, let's say, 3,000 outlets.
Right.
We would be banned from the whole retail space there if it would have faltered. For now, we are still performing well, but the cost to service that channel is very expensive.
Mm.
The revenue is okay, but just that our bandwidth is too stretched right now. So I
Right.
think that is the biggest mistake. Second thing I feel is personally, I also when I joined Rhinestones, there was this I would say near-term pressure to increase the revenue, obviously. And in an outlet, more or less, your revenue is fixed. It
Right.
matures after a time. Then on the CPG side, we were doing our samplings and everything. But there was a third channel, which we never explored, which was restaurants, hotels. So, I would go out, take my bag, walk in the sun, knock on the doors, each and every single restaurant, and ask them for business, basically. We got a lot of business. We got into good hotels, but the ticket size was so small per drop that, again, didn't make sense. Secondly, for restaurants, the cash collection cycle is very long,
Mm.
and you'll be surprised, even in Singapore, they don't pay on time,
Oh,
and sometimes they never pay. Right. So again, mistake number two, without identifying that, do you have capability for cash collection, not just revenue booking? Should you enter this? I mean, yeah. So going forward, we'll work towards not doing it again.
no, I know the cycle times are very different.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sync with sometimes what we are looking at, right? So,
Yeah. So let's say, I mean, I wanted to increase my revenue example by 10% in 2 months, and it's not a big number.
hmm,
If a techie is listening to it, it's not a big number, but it is big for a startup in food space. But to get into a hotel, a five-star hotel, it takes 1 year
hmm,
and sometimes even longer. And the ticket size per drop for an ice cream would be just $500, which in Singaporean context is nothing.
right.
We make a lot more than that on our per day store sale, right? So I think we learned it very quickly, but we reverted back to the, improving the culture, improving the processes, cutting down the
Right.
costs part. Yeah.
No, that makes complete sense. And as we mentioned, this was just more, what are some of the learnings that you got, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and sometimes we I think it's natural to assume that restaurants would do a large amount of business. There is a
Yeah.
lot of money coming in, and since they do a lot of cash business, it should be quick, cycles. But that's
Yeah.
not really what happens. I had done some business quite when I was just out of my 12th for some
Okay.
restaurants, and believe me, the cash never came. So at the end of it, you're wondering what
Exactly.
happened. The actual transaction finished months ago. By the time they
Yeah.
actually closed their books and then came back to you, you were like four cycles down. So it
I
did
mean, yeah,
not,
I mean,
yeah.
then my poor colleague and myself are becoming Vasuli Bhais and going to every
Exactly.
restaurant. It's
Your
such a waste of
constant
time.
reminders, embarrassingly to, please pay us, is sort of starting to look like, you are trying to force them to pay something, but it's actually what is
Yeah,
due.
it's our
So
own money.
yeah,
Yeah.
the cycles
So
are,
we have faced funny situations in the restaurant channel. Like somebody would literally capture our refrigerator, like the freezer, which we gave as a goodwill, and not release it, hide it somewhere else in one of their other stores. And now you're chasing that. So it's bonkers.
no,
Every channel has its challenges, but I think we are not prepared for these two.
no, that's true. No, that's
Yeah.
very interesting. But thank you, Shubham. It was so lovely talking to you, and I have, there are so many takeaways that we can from the session, and it's always a conversation, and I feel that we learn by speaking to each other, and there's just so much that each one brings to the table. So it was a pleasure, and thank you so much for selflessly giving your time and sharing your experiences, a lot of the
Always a pleasure.
challenges and the hiccups. So that's what is interesting.
Yeah, I think more than successes, we are still yet to see bigger success. I think in the short span of time, I've learned a lot of mistakes, done a lot of mistakes. We are doing now good work, but I still see a few of the companies which are a little bit behind the curve doing the same mistakes what we did. At least they should be aware of. If somebody is listening, one person is listening and can get some inspiration, that's worth it.
No, absolutely. That's all it takes. It takes, one change and then that is the butterfly effect that we look at, right? So that's what makes
Yeah.
it. But thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks a lot, Mridula.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.